Welcome to ZKast, everyone. I'm Z.S. Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'm here for a special ZKast. I'm with Sam Bruchhaus from a company called Sumer Sports. They do a lot of AI analytics on sports. In fact, if you look back, I'll include a link. If you look in the YouTube description below, there'll be a link to the video I did with Sumer Sports' CEO, Larissa Horton. And Sam, just before we get into this, a quick intro on yourself and what Sumer Sports does.
Yeah, so I'm a senior data scientist here at Sumer Sports and also analyze the NFL in the media. My background is I was a computer science major. I learned software engineering, and then I also played football at the collegiate level alongside working in sports and basketball and athletic apparel, and I've kind of bounced all over the place before finding a great home here at Sumer Sports, where what we aim to do is allow the eye to meet the AI. We have a deep background in football, in the subject matter experts, the scouts, the general managers. We have over 600 years of experience collectively on that team. And then we try to match that with the AI using groundbreaking tools from tracking data, computer vision, transformers, and kind of trying to blend the two together to come with great insights about the game.
Oh, who'd you play college football for?
I played for the Tulane University Green Wave. I'm a South Louisiana boy through and through. I grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So I spent some years in New Orleans as well.
As a coincidence, I was down in New Orleans for a Stratosphere conference back in 1996, and my wife came with me at the time, my first wife, and my first child was actually born at Tulane Hospital. So I guess there's some linkage there. Now, prior to the draft, Sumer Sports put out a draft guide, and actually Lindsay Rode, who works for Sumer Sports as well, put out a mock first-round draft pick. And so the draft guide and the draft and the mock draft are obviously created by AI. And so I think we all expect the AI to make smart decisions. Now, people still make these decisions. And so we're going to go through the first round of the draft, take a look at what the mock draft said, what the draft guide said, and actually what happened. We won't spend too much time on some of the obvious things, like obviously Cam Ward was projected to be the first pick overall. I think your draft guide even said something clever, like had some basic information on him, and on the mock draft, it said no one really needs commentary right here. So unless there's anything you want to say about Cam Ward, I think we'll just assume that was the right decision made. Now, the second pick, Travis Hunter, your mock draft had him going number 2 to Cleveland. And this is where the new GM, young gun of the Jacksonville Jaguars, traded up to get what he called a generational talent. And in fact, your draft guide said he's the best wide receiver and best corner in the draft. I think he was compared to Shohei Ohtani. Just wondering if you think Jacksonville made the right decision there, moving up that many spots to get him.
So my background in particular is about asset allocation in the draft and using data science techniques to analyze that. And Travis Hunter is a one-of-one player. We haven't really seen players play both ways in college football or the NFL in modern history. What the Jaguars did practically, if you break it down to the expected value of the assets that they traded in order to get the second pick, they're basically making a bet that Travis Hunter can be a two-way player. When you kind of net out the assets, they gave up a future first-round pick, both in value and in reality, to the Cleveland Browns in order to get this pick. And basically the only way that it's going to work out in their favor in the aggregate is if Travis Hunter is an all-pro level player at the cornerback position and at the wide receiver position. That would be something we really haven't seen before, Zias. So it would be really something fantastic, but it's quite the bet for a first-time GM. Definitely wants to shake up the culture. And when I talk to the scouts, it's so difficult to predict some of these draft picks and predict how a player at age 19, 20, 21 will produce over the 3 years. And so you try to get those culture guys. It seems like Travis Hunter is those culture guys. So certified right selection of him at number 2. We will have to see if he ends up making the trade value worth it for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I don't. You played college football, obviously. and playing both ways in college football is a whole lot easier than in the pros. I think that's where the comparison to Shohei Ohtani maybe falls down because Shohei can DH and he's not pitching every day and he's not playing the field every day. If he was actually a first baseman or something, that might be quite a bit different, right? So we'll see. I guess he showed in college he can play both ways, but professional football is a lot different. So yeah,
Right. He did it at a level that I never played both ways from the time I was a freshman in high school all the way up to being a senior in college. So he's definitely a one of one talent for pulling that off.
Yeah. Now the Giants took Abdul Carter, which your draft guide also had number 3. He was number 1 actually on a lot of boards. I think the Giants obviously needed edge rushers, so no surprise there.
So our AI loved him as a pass rusher. We utilize computer vision techniques and transformers in order to get a millisecond by millisecond read of the impact of these players in a way that, frankly, the eye just can't do, even though it is based, obviously, on how scouts evaluate in the past. And so he just creates chaos. You can check out our badges. Those are based on our artificial intelligence Sumer scores on our draft guide on sumersports.com. He has 3 of them. When you have a 3-badge guy, that's something that can really make an impact at the next level.
Yeah, and obviously a guy, Micah Parsons, you look at the impact he had with the Dallas Cowboys, able to create havoc. It seems like that's a good comp for him. And you obviously that completely redefined the Dallas defense after he got him. Number 4, so I'm from the New England area, so I've been watching the rotation of offensive linemen and the bags of football that have been playing left tackle for the New England Patriots. Drake May, obviously, Patriots believe he's a generational talent. I know there was some talk about whether they might try and go get a skilled position guy because the Pats are weak there too. But I think if quarterback's your most important position, then your left tackle is the second most important position. And I really actually like that pick by him.
I love the pick as well. And, you're from New England. I'm biased. I'm a Louisiana boy. My sister now lives in the city in Louisiana where Will Campbell grew up. And he went to LSU. So a little bit of bias. You always got to call it out. But when you just look at the tape, you look at the record and you look at what the artificial intelligence thinks about him, basically he was elite in both run blocking and pass blocking since the time he was 19. And when you do that in the Southeastern Conference down there against some of the best players in what is believed to be the best conference, that's a pretty stout record of winning at your job and winning, of that turning into winning as well. He was a left tackle for Jaden Daniels, who now won the Heisman and has now run the Rookie of the Year, and Garrett Nussmeier, who is supposed to be a very highly touted prospect next year. He kept them clean for 3 years. And, if you want to see a guy produce across what the scouts say, across what the artificial intelligence says, across what the traditional statistics say, he's a great prospect as a left tackle.
Yeah, and I that's something the Pats actually haven't had for a long time, and so it's actually good to see him taking a tackle as tackle. I know in the past they like to do clever things like draft guards and hope they can play tackle, but that really hasn't worked out well for them in the past. So that was good to see. Number 5, actually, your draft guide was surprisingly accurate, right? They said Cleveland would take Mason Graham, or the Jags would take Mason Graham, but they of course traded up. The Cleveland wanted that pick and still took Mason Graham there. The pick from Jacksonville, defensive tackle. From what I've read about him, he's a great run defender. He led Michigan, I think, with in tackles in 2024. He's a big guy that can fill the middle. I think Cleveland's got problems all over the place, but certainly this should shore up the defense, and this is one of the core positions for a player, right?
Right. So Cleveland is an immensely analytical team. I know most of the people in the space have read Moneyball. Paul DePodesta, who is in Moneyball, is the Jonah Hill kind of aggregate character in the film, is now a vice president for the Cleveland Browns organization. So they have a very analytically based approach to the draft. And honestly, a bunch of the question marks that from this draft actually come from them taking the value, trading off of the Travis Hunter pick and adding Mason Graham. Here's, I think, the reason why they made that. I think we've never seen a player like Travis Hunter before. And so if you're just going by the numbers, it's quite an anomaly that player can provide that much two-way impact. It's a lot more safe to go to a position which typically is a little stickier, meaning their performance at the college level is slightly more sticky to the next level. Now that's a slightly is doing a lot of work there. It's very difficult to predict these players, but Mason Graham is very, very similar to Will Campbell, and he had a very, very similar draft cycle, except he's just on the defensive side of the ball. This is a guy who produced basically since the time he was 19 at the college level on excellent teams, including a national championship team a year ago. Across our artificial intelligence and our scouts, we believe that he performed excellently across run defense and pass rushing throughout his career. And then for whatever reason, it may have been smoke screens, may have just been over analysis. Because of both Campbell's arm size and Mason Graham's size, there were discussions of them perhaps not going in the top 5. He ends up going in the top 5 as an elite player to the Browns, them collecting value at a premium position, the defensive tackle position.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a safe pick, right? And so if he was, if that's the guy they wanted, them trading down, they got another first-round draft pick and him. Number 6, again, your draft guide got this, Ashton Jeanty, running back. I love this pick, actually, by the Raiders. I do think the running back position is kind of it's a tough one in the NFL, right? Once a running back puts up a couple of 300 rush seasons and they get up to 28, they're no good. But this one, I've seen comps on Jeanty being Alvin Kamara, Todd Gurley, guys like that, very elusive type of runner. He did play at Boise State, so you don't get the highest level of competition sometimes. But I do think it is a position that Pete Carroll historically has loved, right? Having the good running back. And I don't, this seems like it was the right pick for the Raiders, who, they don't really have a feature back right now.
So just to limit it to just Ashton Jeanty, we have an elusiveness metric, which on a millisecond by millisecond basis defines the probability that a player will be brought down, will be tackled. And Jeanty neutralized those average probabilities better than any player really in college last year. But Zeus, if you were the general manager and you came to me, Sam, the analyst, and said, what do the analytics say about this selection? I would really caution you against it. The reason why is asset allocation in the draft is all about surplus value. These players have locked in contract values. Basically, what the number 6 locked in contract value says for Ashton Jeanty is he has to be a top 5, top 6 running back immediately upon entering the National Football League in order for you to make, quote, a profit off of that selection. That's immensely tough. We've seen teams like the New York Giants draft Saquon Barkley. It turn into a playoff run. Ultimately, they don't get what they want out of him. Like you mentioned, 3-4 years. Seems like the wheels are coming off. Obviously, he had a great season in a Philadelphia Eagles jersey, but we really haven't seen these types of selections pay off for these teams. It's what goes by the loser's curse. That's the name of it. Wow. And it's even more so for running backs in particular.
So you're not expecting them to be, it'll be interesting to see when your fantasy stats come out this year where you've got them slotted in, but you're not expecting them to be a top 5 back.
So here's the kind of note. Fantasy is a lot about what we like to call shares. So what share of the rushes are you going to get? And then you'll probably end up having the sheer counting stats. What I'm a little bit more worried about is the impact on the game. There's a statistic called expected points added, which we analysts like to look at. Basically what it does, it put yards in context. If you're really losing, there's very little time left on the game, and you're not adding a lot of win probability to your team's metrics, or you're not really adding to the probability that you'll score next, then it's not really valuable. The run game just in the NFL has been really limited in the distribution of expected points added, and it ends up kind of being a mean or less than 0. You're really taking away expected points on any given single run. As a result, a running back without a good offensive line really struggles to contribute to a game. I think in the Saquon Barkley view for the Philadelphia Eagles this year, he was more of a ceiling raiser. I worry about how Jeanty will fit into the kind of scheme of things. He could be a very good fantasy player just because he's going to get so many carries, but I worry about his impact on winning.
All right, and that's great analysis. Thanks. Now, what about number 7, Armand Membu from Missouri to the New York Jets? Obviously, they're another team that needs a tackle. Although I don't know who's playing quarterback for them this year. So, right?
Neither do we.
Yeah.
It's
So I
kind of
guess,
a revolving door down there in
yeah,
New York.
yeah. So I guess he's got no one to protect. But whoever is there, they'll have a new tackle coming to protect him. What do the Sumer analytics say about him?
Yeah, so he's an excellent run blocker and he's very, very athletic. Now, the correlations between athleticism and play at the next level are not always fantastic, but the difference is there's a massive training set on athleticism going back to the 80s, and they've basically kept the calculations for the combine the same, even all the way going back into then. So if you're just looking at athleticism, he knocks it out of the park. If we're talking about the surplus value about the running backs, the offensive tackle is probably the second or third most premium position. As a result, it's a good selection there. Wasn't really a reach in terms of the draft. I think it was a pretty down Broadway selection from the Jets.
Yeah, at least they're not doing things like drafting Kyle Brady instead of Dan Marino, or instead of instead of Warren Sapp, right? I guess that was that year. Now, number 8, you had Carolina picking Jalon Walker from Georgia. Carolina, actually, this was maybe the first reach. They took McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. You had him pegged 20, I believe, to go to the Denver Broncos. And what do the analytics say about him?
So Tet had a kind of wide distribution of where he could potentially go. He was thought of to be the certified wide receiver one in this class. And right now, the highest paid non-quarterback is a wide receiver. That's Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the reason why people didn't think the Panthers were going to select him was for kind of 2 reasons. The first is the Panthers invested a lot of money and draft capital last year on the offense. And this year, Dave Canales just straight up came out and told Kay Adams that they were going to focus on the defense. They ended up doing that later in the draft. I think they viewed Tet McMillan as a player at quite literally the most premium non-quarterback position, a guy that they didn't expect to fall to them, even though as of draft week, the distribution started widening of where he could be selected, a way that they could continue to evaluate their quarterback, who is in the 3rd year of his contract, which is typically the year after which you have to evaluate how you're going to move on from that quarterback. And they said, you know what? More offense is great. Let's just add him right here. Let's figure it out down the way. And I got to tell you, Zeus, the vice president of analytics there used to be with us at Sumer. He was my boss. Yeah. His name's Eric Yeager. And so, some of the tenets that he impressed upon us underlings that he taught us so well, he implemented throughout this draft. So it was really cool to see that happen.
All right. So do you like this pick there?
I did. I think you're grabbing the consensus best player at the most premium non-quarterback position. I think it's an okay pick. I could have seen them going with an edge rusher or another selection, and I think it would have been fine as well.
All right. And number 9, the Saints Super Sports draft mock draft had Michael Williams, edge rush from Georgia. Actual pick was Kelvin Banks, another tackle from Texas. Again, showing the importance of this. Derek Carr is out. So we're not sure who's quarterback there, but so I guess another tackle on a quarterbackless team. And I think you had Banks going.
Banks was an interesting one. Yeah, Banks was an interesting one because our analytics thought he was a top tier tackle. We have a brick wall badge and a bulldozer badge on him, which indicates that he really knocked our AI metrics out of the park in both pass blocking and run blocking. At the same time, the scouts agreed with it. They thought he was a top-tier tackle as well. For whatever reason, in the combine, in the media sphere, in the consensus, the wisdom of the crowds, basically until last week, he was kind of floating around the middle of the middle draft picks, which is kind of the story of this draft. There's a lot of guys floating around, between 9 and 20, perhaps. And the Saints ended up selecting him. I think the Saints think that they got to build their offensive line. Again, offensive tackle, a premium position. I'm pretty okay with this selection as well.
Yeah. Number 10, the mock draft had Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan. He indeed was picked there. I'm generally not a fan of taking tight ends that high. However, I will say the tight end position in the NFL seems to have had a rebirth. It used to be Travis Kelce and nobody. But Ben Johnson did a lot with Sam Laporta when he was at the Lions. And so what do you think of this pick?
So I tend to agree with you along the same lines as the running back position, just not to that level. But as you mentioned, the tight end position is changing. Typically, the three things that we say of why I would caution taking a tight end in the first round is number one, not as much surplus value. Travis Kelce and top tight ends are not paid as much as wide receivers or other people. So they're going to have to be a pretty excellent tight end right off the bat in order to really contribute the amount that you are paying them. Second, typically we see a long curve to reach their full potential. And the kind of adage that actually Eric Eager, who I just mentioned, drafted Ted McMillan, came up with is if you're drafting a tight end high, you're drafting someone else's tight end. And the reason that is, which again, I meeting the AI is what I always like to see, is the scouts and the coaches always say that it's very difficult for a tight end coming in at 230 to 250 pounds to learn how to block NFL defensive linemen. And in order to be an excellent tight end, you have to do both. So that's kind of the second item of why we fear that. And then third is it's difficult to be a two-way player. And if you do have a wide receiver on the board there, which they really didn't, they specialize at catching the ball. Now, I think I'm okay with this pick for the reason following. Ben Johnson, the new coach for the Chicago Bears, uses 12 personnel more often and more effectively than most offensive coordinators and now head coaches in the league. I think he's going to utilize Colston Loveland out of Michigan in a very unique fashion alongside Cole Kmet, their other tight end, and really get them in the mix to play them. Again, like you mentioned, I think it's a little bit of a reach, but I can understand the logic of why they wanted to make this selection right here.
Yeah, well, it's from a fantasy perspective, it's good because now there's actually some tight ends to draft. So
right.
11 was the San Francisco 49ers, and they got Michael Williams. The draft guide, I think you said, thought would go 9, and so he dropped a little bit from where Sumer had him projected to go. But man, the 49ers, for such a dominant team for so long, need help everywhere.
That's true. They let a bunch of guys that have all pro regime resume go this year. And so they add Michael Williams. His key stat is he's an excellent run defender. I think he's going to line up on the other side of Nicky Bosa, who's their certified all pro pass rusher, and he's really going to be a run disruptor. You'll note as we continue going through this, there was a lot of good edge rushers in these drafts. Yeah. They each have their own questions, but they each have their own kind of superpower. And Michael Williams is run defense.
Yeah. Now, number 12, Dallas Cowboys took Tyler Booker, a guard out of Alabama. I'm not a big fan of guards going that high. I think you had him 16. Dallas, another team that, I don't know, they're not doing anything in free agency. And so, they do need offensive line help. I think Dak's getting pretty beat up there. And so what does your AI analytics say about him?
So typically the surplus value for guards is not fantastic, but as you kind of mentioned earlier about the Patriots, this was kind of a swing offensive line draft where there were only a couple tackles. So if you were going to get a certified premium offensive lineman, it was going to probably be a guard or a tackle that may not project to play tackle. Tyler Booker is an interesting case where the eye is a lot stronger on him than the AI. We thought he was pretty good in pass protection. We thought he was pretty good in run defense over the course of his career, but he really struggled in our advanced athletic scores. And that didn't match what the scouts said. The scouts loved them. Lindsay Rhodes, whose mock draft you're kind of referencing here, her colleagues mentioned that Tyler Booker was one of their favorite players in the class. So it's going to be interesting to see how this selection plays out. I think they're going to put him in the correct scheme. The Cowboys typically have an excellent scouting track record, which is interesting given it's very difficult to be correct in the NFL draft. They've done it for many a year now, just with their scouting team and their consistency. So it'll be interesting to see how this one ends up. But as you'll note, as we kind of get in the middle of this draft, there's a lot more questions about these guys than there were in the top 10.
Yeah. 13, Kenneth Brandt from Michigan goes to Miami. You had Miami, you had actually Grant 24th. And so you could look at that as one of the bigger stretches based on Lindsay's draft guide. You gave him a Terminator badge, though, so I'm not sure what that means. So what do you guys think about him?
So Kenneth Grant is part of that Michigan defensive line. As you mentioned, he got a Terminator badge. He was, highly favored by the artificial intelligence. He's a massive, massive human being. I saw him at the Shrine Bowl. He plays what they call one tech, which is right over the center. His job is to clog up the middle. The question for him is how much of his contribution at the college level can we contribute only to him? Mason Graham was on the same defensive line as him. There were some selections last year that were on the same defensive line as him. And Josiah Stewart, who later went to the Rams, also lit up the artificial intelligence grades as well. As a result, he was another guy who had one of these wide ranges in the middle of the first round. We really didn't have an idea of what Miami needed. They kind of needed a little bit of everything except for maybe the quarterback position and even maybe the wide receiver position with some questions about Tyreek Hill. So was this a quality selection? Yes. The defensive tackle position is premium. Kenneth Grant did have a great resume on that Michigan defensive line, but there's still some questions, Zias.
Now, next pick, the Colts, Tyler Warren, tight end of Penn State. That's actually who you had. And actually, I thought Lindsay made an interesting comment here. Said if the Colts would throw a party if Tyler Warren was still there. Why is that?
So Tyler Warren was considered to be the top tight end in this class for most of the draft. And really going into draft day, I think the Bears just preferred Colson Loveland, but it was kind of different flavor of the week, depending on who you liked. And I think he fell to the Colts in all of my mock drafts as well. I had him going to the Colts. I think it's just a perfect pairing for the Colts to figure out their young quarterback situation, which now they've added another young quarterback in the late rounds in Riley Leonard. They have three: Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, and now Riley Leonard. They're going to try to figure that out. Tyler Warren's going to be an interesting weapon to try to figure that out with.
All right. And then next on the board was who is that? Atlanta Falcons. Actually, this was interesting. Dylan Walker went 15. Your mock draft had him number 8. And so you would look at that and think that was pretty good value.
I did think it was pretty good value. The Atlanta Falcons, president of Sumer Sports, was the previous GM of the Atlanta Falcons, Thomas Dimitroff. They haven't had an edge rusher in over 20 years. Jalen Walker projects as an edge rusher. He did play, behind the line of scrimmage at the off-ball linebacker position at Georgia, won the Butkus Award as a result. It's kind of a stretch to say he's going to be an excellent edge, but I think he really just fell due to the mechanics of the draft, and it ended up being great value for the Atlanta Falcons.
All right. And then next on the board was the Arizona Cardinals. Is that right? Just looking through the list here. And they took Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. You projected that it would be Tyler Booker, who, of course, is already gone. So your thoughts here?
So Nolan had a kind of wide distribution of where he could go, including some people thought he might go in the second round. His artificial intelligence was fantastic. We thought he was an excellent player, particularly at penetrating the offensive line. When you went to the play-by-play and our frame-by-frame, millisecond-by-millisecond ratings and really looking at the line graphs, he was able to really create havoc for teams. The questions were off the field for him. There were some character concerns. I can't report myself on any of those, but they are something that general managers and front offices take very seriously. He ends up going a little ahead of where people expected him to, around the 16th pick. But I think based on his talent, that probably makes sense.
Yeah. Now 17, your mock draft actually hit that one. I think Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, edge rusher. Cincinnati certainly could, probably use that. It seemed to be, that's right about where he should have gone.
That makes sense to me. Another athletic combine performer. He's one of the more interesting people in this draft. He did not produce in the traditional box score statistics, not a ton of tackle for losses, not a ton of sacks. However, when you broke it down at the frame-by-frame level, he was really hindering other teams in their run game. He was a 99th percentile run defender in our run defense Sumer score for defensive linemen. What that indicates to me is that in the scheme at Texas A&M, he really did his job, but didn't really go outside of the bounds of his job as well. It'll be interesting to see how he slots into the Cincinnati Bengals, given that they have a retiring defensive end, Sam Hubbard, who played very similar to the way he plays, and then are kind of on the ropes. Potential holdout Trey Hendrickson on the other side, a potential defensive player of the year last year, who is kind of their sack master. He's probably going to hold out for a contract. He may be on the move as well. Shamar Stewart seemed like the correct pick all around for them right here.
All right, number 18 with the Seahawks, and I grew up in the Seattle area, so I'm always curious to see what happens. Mock draft had him taking Kelvin Banks. He, of course, went a lot higher. Gray Zabel, probably the next best lineman on the board there under the guard. Looking maybe some flexibility there. What'd you guys think of this one?
So Gray Zabel is an interesting one. He's from a small FCS or double A school, as they call it, called North Dakota State. And as a result, it's tough to get data on some of those teams. And here at Sumer Sports, we're innovating in that place. And some of the data shows that he's just an excellent swing offensive lineman. He played mostly tackle at North Dakota State. And North Dakota State, despite being small, has actually sent a lot of guys to the NFL. I think that the Seahawks are probably going to play him at guard. So we'll see how that turns out for them. But it as you mentioned, we thought they were going to go offensive line. They're going to go offensive line. They want to run the ball this year. Their offensive coordinator led the league in run rate over expected last year while he was with the Saints. His name's Clint Kubiak. And so I think if you want to run the ball, you want to get some tough offensive linemen. Yeah,
well, I think with Sam Darnold's a quarterback this year, right? So, we'll see how Sam does. He had kind of a spotty year last year. Tampa Bay was 19. Your draft guide had him picking Jahad Campbell from Alabama, the linebacker. In fact, they took a wide receiver out of Ohio State, and Emeka Bukin. You had him actually going 26 to the Rams, and so by your analytics, this is a bit of a reach.
Yeah, this one was a little bit of a shock. He was suspected to go in the back half of the first round, which he did. But the reason why this was a shock is because the Bucs have two all-pro wide receivers, even though they are getting older and have been injured, in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and then also drafted highly a wide receiver last year who kind of came along as the year went along in Jalen McMillan. And so this is kind of a rich get richer, very similar story to the one we told with the Panthers of they want to continue bolstering their offense in a division where I don't think they think other teams can score with them. And I think they just tried to select the best player that they saw available other than need. As you mentioned, there were probably some other players that you could have made an argument were better here. Egbuka was very good in our artificial intelligence metrics, though. So I'm fine with the pick, but it was kind of a shocking one at the time.
All right, Sam. So number 20, the Broncos drafted Barron, the cornerback out of Texas. I think you had, who did Sumer project they take at 20? They actually were looking at Ted McMillan there. And so it's another team, obviously cornerback, one of the most important positions in the field. And so what were your thoughts on him?
So he's an excellent zone coverage defender.
Actually, sorry, you had him at 11. And so this would indicate pretty good value, right? So,
right. So he's a pretty good cornerback. He's one of the better cornerbacks in this draft, much like the Buccaneers. And this is going to be the story for a couple of these teams coming up here. The rich get richer. The Broncos had one of the best defenses in expected points added per play last year, that stat that we were talking about that they allowed for offenses. He was excellent in zone coverage last year. He really did well all together in pass coverage as well. But what's interesting about him is he actually plays in the slot a lot more than he plays the other outside positions. And he's kind of a positional, kind of versatile guy. And so I think what they're going to do is try to use him alongside their starter from last year, Riley Moss, and their Defensive Player of the Year cornerback, Pat Surtain, and just build a super strong secondary, try to inhibit teams from scoring at all on them.
All right. Now, 21 was probably the most interesting pick. Your draft guide, and I think half the draft guides in the world, had Shedeur Sanders, the Deion's kid, out of Colorado going there. Obviously, Pittsburgh is the kind of maybe team for Aaron Rodgers. Obviously not signed yet. They passed on him, though, and of course, many other teams passed on him for many rounds. They took Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon, and actually your draft guide had him 13. And so one could look at this as good value. But what were your thoughts on passing on Shador and taking a defensive tackle there?
Look, Shador had a kind of day one, day two profile, certainly. And the Pittsburgh Steelers really don't have any quarterback. And we saw Aaron Rodgers really struggle to win games last year. The Jets were favored in a ton of their games. Really, they should have a winning record if Vegas was the decider here. And they just consistently underperformed. So even if they do add Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be going in this year with an aging quarterback, but let's throw him aside for now. He's not on the roster. A backup quarterback that they've released, I think, twice now, who they've now re-signed in Mason Rudolph, and a much, much later pick in the draft in Will Howard. And that's not exactly a recipe historically for success. The selection of Derek Harmon makes sense. Again, a guy at a premium position, the defensive tackle position that really lit up all of our numbers. But it was certainly intriguing to me that they didn't address the quarterback position, the most important position perhaps in all of sports, in the first or second or third or fourth rounds.
Yeah, although what's weird is they'll finish 9-7. So no matter
if Tomlin does it with that quarterback crew, he might be able to do it with me at quarterback.
Yeah, so maybe hop in the draft next year. Okay, 22 on the board was the LA Chargers. Your draft guide had Will Johnson from Michigan going there. He was, of course, already picked. They picked the
Chargers actually went with a running.
Sorry, Omarion Hampton, right? Yeah,
Omarion Hampton. That's correct.
Yeah.
And again,
you had actually Buffalo had him taken at 30. So
right. And so Omarion Hampton it was part of this really strong draft class that I discussed with Genty of why you probably could actually go ahead and get a solid running back in the second or third rounds. I stick with that sentiment with the Chargers. I probably think they could have gone with another position. They did have a awful need at running back last year. They had struggled with injury, really couldn't get the running game off the ground. They do actually have two tentpole tackles that they really believe in. They add Mekhi Becton at the guard position. So as I noted, if you do want a ceiling raiser, perhaps Omarion Hampton can be that guy. I just think they could have gotten a guy who was a similar value later on in the draft.
Yeah, and actually, I do think Justin Herbert there does need some help, and so if they don't get him some help there, he's going to get killed. And so, if you believe the quarterback's the most important position, then maybe having somebody there that can take a little bit of work off him would help. So now 23, the Sumer guide had Green Bay taking Josh Simmons as a tackle. They of course got Matthew Golden, wide receiver. Interesting pick. Wide receiver, obviously an important position. Texas receivers, I don't know. What'd you think here?
It was a very interesting pick.
Yeah.
Golden really didn't stand out a ton. He was a solid player in all of our artificial intelligence metrics. He didn't really stand out a ton in any of them the way that some of these other players that we discussed did. And moreover, the Green Bay Packers have a ton of pass catchers. I'm talking like 4 guys that they get the ball to that are wide receivers and 2 that are tight ends. They typically didn't spend a ton of draft capital on wide receivers or pass catchers or skill players in the first or really even second rounds. And interestingly, this year they added 2, him and Sevion Williams out of TCU, kind of unprecedented for their regime. And I don't know how it's going to end up for them. I think they may have just added another arrow to the quiver of a team that doesn't have their sharpest arrow yet.
Yeah, that's probably true. Now, 24, Donovan Jackson went to Minnesota. He wasn't actually in your first round draft pick. So this was a bit of a reach. I think another guard. So we saw a lot of linemen go. He does seem pro ready though, coming to Ohio State. And thoughts here?
They called this the meat and potatoes draft. So there's a ton of linemen that came off the board, both on the offense and defensive side of the ball. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is actually an analytical based guy. And it's been funny because last year he traded up twice, which isn't necessarily the analytical way. And this year, everyone, including me, thought that he was going to trade off of this number 24 pick. And especially given that 25 got traded and 26 got traded, I think they probably could have done it. I guess they fell in love with this guy. It was an interesting selection for me, a little head scratching, but They do build up an offensive line, and in particular, an interior offensive line that has struggled for years and years. I've gone on many Vikings shows in the past year and a half, and they always are complaining about their interior offensive line. They addressed it in free agency. They now address it in the draft.
Yeah, so the next pick, 25, Houston traded to the New York Giants traded up to get Houston's pick, and took Jackson Dart, who I think, from what I had, all the draft guides listed him really as a developmental quarterback. And it's not like this team has shown any ability to really develop quarterbacks. And plus they got Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, so maybe they're hoping Dart can sit behind those two and learn or something. You didn't have him going in the first round either. Boy, this was a surprise, wasn't it?
It was certainly a surprise. I'm actually okay with the selection, though, even though it was, if you're looking at consensus big boards, like a 30 slot reach, even though his expected draft position outside of just our draft guide was around here due to probably the fact that he was a quarterback and probably the third highest rated quarterback in this draft. I'm okay with it because they didn't really give up a ton of value. There's these things called comp picks in the NFL of when you have free agents that are signed by other teams. The NFL actually gifts you with compensatory picks. They basically traded a compensatory picks and kind of swapped around picks with for the 25th pick and end up grabbing a quarterback. I'm not the one to criticize quarterbacks because it's very difficult. Research has indicated that we do actually do, as a draft community and as league personnel, an excellent job of sorting and organizing and doing analysis on quarterback information. It's just a very variant position with a high standard deviation. And so as a result, I think they just want to figure out their quarterback position. As you mentioned, they have Russell Wilson, they have Jameis Winston, they add Jackson Dart. It seems as if they now have three options to try to figure out how they can become a winning team this year.
Yeah, well, hopefully they won't give one $30 million or whatever it was and let the best running back in the league go. So that's another
very
story.
True.
Yeah. Now, 26 was another trade. LA Rams held that pick. Atlanta traded up, and they took an edge rusher from Tennessee, James Peters Jr. I'm trying to see if you even had him in the first round. I don't think so. But what do you think here?
So there were varying opinions about James Pierce. The research typically shows that guys who drop after the combine typically start playing to their rating before the combine. And the reason why they typically fall are due to kind of big time concerns. And typically the guys who have really, really big time concerns fall completely out of the stratosphere. When guys just fall a couple of picks, as James Pierce did, it typically ends up being all right. I, live on the show, loved this pick. I thought that James Pierce was a guy that at the end of the year this year and at the end of the year last year, people thought was going to be like a top 10 pick. There were kind of off the field concerns with him that were rumored of why he was dropping. But then kind of the core news came out. We broke down the trade and what those trades net out to be. And basically it ended up being another, like a first round pick in addition that went to the Rams for this 26th selection. That's really unprecedented. And so James Pierce is going to have to be an excellent player to live up to the amount of capital that the Falcons traded to get him at this spot.
Yeah, I did see some mock drafts that have him going as high as 15, though. So if he does work out, then, the players like this are, this is a, really important position for teams. So, best of luck to him, I guess. So, 27 was Baltimore Ravens. Your draft had him taking Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. Of course, he was gone. They took a safety, Malachi Starks. I don't think he was in your top first round either. So thoughts here?
Malachi Starks was a guy who had a very, very wide distribution. The safety position is not a premium position. It is very hard to predict. He was an excellent run defender this year. He had some questions in coverage. They really utilized him all over the field, and that's why the safety position is so hard to kind of figure out, is because they are the most versatile players on the field. They can play in a multitude, 6+, 7+ positions, and are asked to do that quite a bit. I think this is actually an okay selection. for the Baltimore Ravens, given how they like to use their safeties. I think he's going
Yeah.
to have a limited but very specific, very important role in Zach Orr, the defense coordinator in Baltimore's defense. And I think he can recapture some of that stuff he had last year in a Ravens uniform.
Yeah, and actually ESPN called him a home run pick, so we'll see where he goes. So we'll see if the AI analytics actually prove out more than the ESPN does. 28 Detroit Lions. They took Williams out of Ohio State. You projected James Pierce Jr. Thoughts here?
So this was actually the biggest reach of the first round in terms of the consensus. In terms of the way we view him, he's an I meets the AI guy. Some big questions in the pass game, but an excellent run stuffer. I think the Lions kind of just play by to their own ear now. They get the guys that they want. They had some really good picks, some really questionable picks in this draft, but they have a culture and a process that they follow, and I'd rather them follow a process that's clear, which theirs is very clear. They draft guys that they like and are Lions guys, and it all seems to make sense in terms of their culture, even when they make these big reaches, which, make us question. It's a tightrope to walk, but I'd rather some process than no evident process.
Yeah, and the Commanders, 29, took Josh Cornley Jr., tackle, another lineman taken, so hence your meat and potatoes. The Sumer draft guy had Nikai Emawari from South Carolina with safety. I kind of like the offensive tackle pick better, though.
I ended up liking this. I did not think they were going to be in a range to select these guys. I thought that in particular Simmons and Connerly, Simmons who ends up going 32, were going to be off the board by then. But basically, we thought that the Commanders didn't love this draft. They traded a lot of draft resources this year for previous all-pro players such as Deebo Samuel from the San Francisco 49ers and Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans. As a result, I thought they perhaps were going to trade back out of 29. I think they just have Jaden Daniels as their quarterback and want to provide a good line for him. Connerly was very good in all of our analytics, and he also, despite kind of being embarrassed on a very single play that got me up out of my seat at the Senior Bowl, ended up being voted the best offensive lineman there. As you mentioned, I liked the tackle pick. Premium position to protect a premium player in Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, and actually, I was a little bit of a Jaden Daniels skeptic. I didn't know if he could keep the momentum all year, but boy, I think that guy's going to have a big year this year. So, but that's another video, I think. Number 30, Maxwell Harrison, Kentucky cornerback, goes to the Buffalo Bills. I don't hate the pick. I think he's a little small, for an NFL corner, but they're a good team. They got a lot of good defensive players, and he should fit well there, I would think.
So their defense last year was really the weakness of the team. They, especially down the stretch, really, really struggled. And Josh Allen is Superman. So Josh Allen really covered it up all the way into the playoffs. I think they just needed anybody to provide help at every position pretty much, except for a few key guys that really needed depth behind them. So I like that they went defense here.
Yeah, well, maybe Josh Allen can play defense too. So
he probably can.
Yeah. And then 31-32 was interesting because it was supposed to be KC and then the Eagles, but of course they traded picks, and the Eagles picked 31 and KC picked 32. We'll talk about these together since we're down at the bottom of the board. 31. The Eagles took Jihad Campbell from Alabama, the linebacker, and I do like the pick that the KC made of the offensive tackle Josh Simmons on Ohio State, just because I thought that Mahomes is getting killed every game. So, what do you think of these?
So the Philadelphia Eagles have probably the best analytical draft process of anyone in the league, and it mirrors almost to a T what people like to do. Is they draft players who are high on the consensus boards, and they draft players from really big schools. In this case, they go seemingly with a non-premium position in the linebacker position, but indications from Howie Roseman indicate that they expect him to play edge rusher, or at least play a lot of snaps at edge. This dude knocked every analytic out of the park. The reason why he dropped so far was due to injury concerns. Interesting that the Eagles traded up. They very rarely do, but when they do what they did in this draft, which was basically give up a much later pick or swap picks in order to contain that value. This ended up being a very simple trade. They gave up much later draft capital for the 31st pick, get Jahad Campbell, and I think the Chiefs got the guy that they wanted all along, the tackle Josh Simmons, who a lot of people thought was going to be much more highly picked. He had a massive, massive injury this year alongside some concerns off the field as well. He ends up going 32. I could very, very, very easily see him starting, especially given the lack of investment in the offensive line in free agency from the Chiefs. I could see him starting day one for the Chiefs.
Yeah, so these both, I think, fit what the teams needed. And I think
100%.
In fact, both these picks you had much higher in Lindsay's mock draft. So, I think in some ways the rich get richer here, right?
That's what they say. Again, like I mentioned at the top, Richard Thaler, the economics professor from University of Chicago, the guy in The Big Short who's playing blackjack with Selena Gomez. He came up with the loser's curse paradigm, and as you said, the losers end up getting fired just because their teams probably aren't all that good, and they may add the best player in the draft, but it's still hard to win. But then the teams at the end get to address needs, get to grab guys who are falling for one reason or another. And like you said, the Philadelphia and the Eagles and the Chiefs seem to get two really, really fantastic players, or at least fantastic prospect profiles at positions of need, despite picking with the last two selections of the first round.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's hope the Jackson Dart winds up being an all-pro, I suppose, since, to me, that was one of the bigger reaches. But all right, Sam, anything else you want to add? Any other kind of final first-round thoughts here?
No, thank you for having me, Zias.
Yeah.
This was excellent. And I love talking about football, so I'm always happy to come back and talk a little ball with you and your audience anytime.
Yeah, well, I think we should maybe do that during football seasons. Fantasy football is always a lot of controversy. Who should go what, where? What I always find funny with fantasy, too, is I do pretty well, but I never score very well on the Yahoo when they give you the grade post draft grade. So screw you, Yahoo.
No, you nailed it on the head. Like, people give out the real draft grades, and me and Lindsay Rhodes, who were mentioning her draft guide, her mock draft in this on the Sumer Sports Show, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. We were saying we hate doing draft grades because, just like you said, all it ends up is people saying "screw you, Sam," or "screw you, Lindsay," or "screw you, Zias." And so I don't like people saying "screw you," so I don't give out draft grades.
So you don't give out draft. All right. And all right. Anyway, Sam Bruchhaus from Sumer Sports. It was great talking football with you. Great talking AI with you, though, more importantly. And I guess we'll be able to track how these players do and how your draft guide did, comparing them. And for those of you interested in the draft guide, I'll include a link in the YouTube description below. There's also something called Sumer Brain, in which you can just ask it a bunch of questions. I'll put that in the YouTube description below as well. So on behalf of Sam Bruchhaus from Sumer Sports, I'm Zias Caraval from ZK Research, and thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on my next episode of ZKast. Thanks, Sam.